I definitely don't look like the model of VC, but I think in some ways that also kind of helped me, because I think the right LPs, they were like, oh, okay, there's something, like you'll probably get someone that middle of the road VCs would not.
Thank you so much, Molly, for joining us to chat about all you're building with Moth Fund today. Before we get into all of the details, can you give me like a 30-second blurb about who you are and kind of what you're doing right now?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. I am the sole GP behind Moth Fund. Moth Fund is a pre-seed and seed firm that invests in companies across all sectors, but just really focused on exceptional talent. And my background is I started off studying film and then got into tech by way of design, and just have been here ever since, basically. And I started to specialize more and more in helping tech companies at the earliest stages tell their stories, and translated that work into Moth Fund and kind of found the business model for it with investing in venture capital.
So you started off in the film space. How did you make your way here? Like, what were the steps along the way? What were the different paths that you kind of went down?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was always the art kid growing up. So I knew I wanted to do something creative. It's just how my brain is wired. And went to film school and found my way more into design roles again and again. And then COVID hit and I started to explore other spaces, and tech was a very promising, interesting area. I'd stumbled across Figma and kind of weaseled my way in by doing these kind of like strange projects that were more on these blending between product and marketing roles, and found that I just loved the people. There was a certain like agency in the air, and there was like culture within technology that I didn't want to give up. And so I just stayed, and I started doing more and more of those kind of like product design marketing roles at Notion. And then once I graduated, I started kind of specializing in that and consulting for companies like Stripe and Retool, browser company. And through that, I became a Sequoia Scout because of the proximity to founders. And I just realized investing was like the better business model for what I was already doing. And because they really like aligns the incentives for me to long-term be partnered with these founders as like a thought partner in all things storytelling and brand. And so I raised my first fund. It was $4 million. I did 33 pre-seed seed checks, and I'm now I'm working on my second fund, Fund 2 of Moth Fund.
Coming from the more of like creative and art background, many people might not think you would end up in the VC or investing space, but I'm sure that there were so many skills or experiences that you had throughout your art background that really have helped you today. Mm-hmm. How have you kind of fused the two, to really be able to help these founders that you're investing in and the ones that you consulted with as well?
I think the way that I see winning in venture, and this is my hypothesis on winning and what I've seen just observing around me, is you just need to be differentiated. Mm-hmm. So you need to offer something that nobody else is, either at a stage or in a way or with packaging and a perspective that is unique. And that is, I think, where like value add is derived. And for me, being creative and specializing in the earliest stages and serving also just like as an understanding thought partner to equally creative and outlier founders, I think is kind of my like interesting, weird amalgamation that makes it something that founders see the value in and want to partner with me. And so I think that also just the through line of studying art, being in a lot of these different environments, both the product and the marketing side, all of these different amalgamations, it just was like a masterclass in storytelling in a lot of different forms. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky, very lucky, to be around a lot of other people at these companies that were very good at it, and I could kind of like learn their craft in different ways.
Mm-hmm. How does the creative side of things then play into what your day-to-day is with these founders? Are you helping them still with the design aspect or with the marketing aspects like you've done, in previous roles of yours, or how is it coming to fruition now?
I mainly serve as a thought partner.
Okay.
I think I have a lot of portfolio companies, and my strategy is more of these like smaller checks on the earlier side. But I try to really serve as, from the very beginning, the person that is their first call when they're thinking about how they're presenting themselves, how the story is resonating and how it's falling short, what is the right kind of words, and also actual literal partners for them to work with from the beginning to kind of like bring their vision to fruition. Because I often distill it to the founder kind of contains this interestingness, and it might be a mission or a ambition or whatever they're building, and it's about translating that. And often they just need somebody that is external that can tell them what is objectively interesting about their story and how it should be portrayed. And so it's my honor to serve that role to them.
How do you find what's special about founders, both to tell their story and then also to decide that you're going to put your own, money and the fund's money into their ventures?
I think it just comes down to spending time with people. I think like I only really developed this kind of felt sense and the conviction and seeing the qualities that I want to see for me to believe that they're going to be a venture scale founder by just seeing them in a lot of different contexts and how they behave and how their personality spikes. And I'm a pretty strong believer that like everyone's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. So until I have an understanding of what that is, I don't really feel confident in understanding them enough to make a bet myself. But I think more broadly, the things that I look for while I'm spending that time are a mix of like taste and competency. Taste I just define as like a competency that means that they have high quality standards that they can actually actualize, mixed with commercial instincts. Like they need to know how to capture the value that they create for it to make sense for VC, as well as I think just like a hard won determination, something steely about them that makes me sure that they're going to continue pushing again and again and again.
Are there some of those strengths that you look out for that you find yourself really drawn to with the founders that you're working with?
Yeah, I think I've definitely had to learn to avoid perfectionist founders because I think like the downside of taste is that some people never get past the loop of having high quality standards but being too scared to disappoint themselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that like I like the people that have the high quality standards because I think that I can uniquely help them often overcome that, but I have to step back from that sometimes and just be like, I can't spend the time necessarily. Like, do I actually just believe in their slope enough to know that they'll get over this? Or do I just want to bet on people that have already overcome this hurdle?
Yeah. When you're looking at these companies, you typically invest around $100,000, correct, into their pre-seed or seed rounds. Why is that scale and size of a company and size of a check what you are most focused on right now? Why does that size make sense to you?
Yeah. So my first one was very much, and my second fund will be too, like a straightforward power law strategy. And so basically just a couple of the companies in the portfolio, I had 33 in my fund one, will hopefully be very big hits and like massively unicorn venture scale. And that is something that I just basically need lots of shots on goal to accomplish that. And so going forward, I think I will have more kind of a slightly larger check size with more reserves to like double down on what's winning. But to start, I really wanted to kind of prove out my taste and show my access and like which types of founders should work with me and discover that myself. And I'm really glad that I took that kind of more straightforward approach in fund one.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any like I guess trends or industries or types of businesses that you feel like have been particularly either like successful or just exciting for you to work with in that first round?
I think it's funny. I've done a lot of work of like, what are the through lines to my fund one and like what's working? And to be honest, it's like all the weirdest companies are like the ones that are like doing the most interesting stuff, have the most, tactical metric markups, that kind of thing. It's usually the ones that people don't understand. And that is kind of like the most interesting thing. But I think more pertinently, I think all of the founders of the companies that seem to be trending more on like the venture scale direction are very outlier people. Like there's no one else like them. They're an amalgamation of qualities that I've never seen put together in that way. And it might mean they're actually just like they're great against their greatest strengths, their greatest weakness. So it might actually be holding them back in some ways that makes some people not understand them. But I think there is like a lot of courage in being misunderstood, and for some of them it really works.
Do you have any examples of those 33 that you feel like have been that's really stand out in your mind of like the most either promising or the ones that you feel like you're really excited to see where they go in the future? Yeah.
There's a company called New Computer, and it's founded by a friend of mine named Jason Wan and Sam Whitmore, and they are building in like the consumer AI space. So it's obviously like one of the hardest games that they can play. But I think what excites me about them is that they are two of the most competent people I know in their respective domains of design and engineering, as well as they bring a perspective and an empathy that they imbue into the product and what they're building, that in this way that I think they're going to hit on something very special that no one else would be incentivized or interested in building. And I think that coupled with their very high quality standards and like very fast pace of iteration is the type of thing that like as a pre-seed investor, there's no better bet in my book.
Yeah.
And I'm honored to support them.
In terms of the AI space, it's obviously a huge topic among investors, among founders, among businesses of all sorts right now. What are your thoughts on the future of AI? Is it overhyped right now? Is it going to change everything forever? Like, where do you see the AI space taking us moving forward?
Yeah. To be honest, like, I don't really have very sophisticated thoughts on AI. I think, but what I do have is like, I try to make it my job to specialize in knowing where all the talented people are. And I know that in the last year or two, so many of the most talented people that I know have been building in AI. And so that's where I spent quite a significantly amount of time. And I think I'm going to continue doing that no matter where it leads me. But I think that there is something to be said for like when it is such a crowded space and game, you really have to look for the people that are at the very top of their craft. And my very loose framework for thinking about AI companies also is something around it either needs to be category creation, something that none of the big companies would touch, or it needs to be something that is so vertical specific that it's basically a SaaS company with just like a layer on top that makes it basically supercharged.
Yeah. And other than AI, are there any other trends over that past like 1 to 2 year period that you mentioned there that you feel like investors are really latching on to?
I definitely saw a lot of hardware.
Okay.
There's a lot of very talented people building in. There was consumer hardware, but there was also just like larger plays that have been incubating for a while, robotics, things of that sort. I think that deep tech continues to be an area that has interest from investors, so the companies continue to be founded. But I think that in general, there's been kind of a diaspora in like the last, since the beginning of the year, this 2024. And I'm kind of excited to see that trend because I think it's becoming a little bit more evenly distributed.
If you have any piece of advice for founders who are coming to investors like you today, what would it be? How can they break into an industry when so many people are looking for money? What can you tell them about maybe the ways to best do it?
There's a couple failure modes that founders fall into. I think one of them is they overemphasize the business. I think in others, they overemphasize just needing connections and not really having much beyond that. I think that like the best founders really balance like a deep ambition and clear vision of like what they want to build and why, mixed with knowing the importance of relationships. And trying to tread both of those lines simultaneously, I think, is something that is kind of like the task of successfully fundraising. And so I think that investing in the bedrock of both of those before you go out to raise, I think it is quite helpful. Or just having like a trusted group of people that are like your thought partners that can give you feedback on both and kind of develop those concurrently so that you have the relationships in place that can intro you to investors or already are investors, mixed with like a clarified vision of like what you're building and why and what your ambition actually looks like to its fullest fruition.
Yeah. For the founders who are in those very early stages, maybe pre-seed, maybe even pre-product, how can they exemplify that to you? Like, this is what I want to build. This is what I'm currently building.
Yeah.
If they don't already have something tangible that they can show you.
They definitely don't need to have like a product or even like a company structure or anything of that sort. I think I really look for somebody that has clarity of thought. And to me, like I'm a little biased because I love writing myself and it's served me quite well in my career. But I think that there is something very, very powerful about a very well-written memo that just details where you're going in the short term, where you're going in the long term, what the potential business plays are here. You don't need to have that fleshed out, but you need to be clear that you're thinking that way for it to make sense for venture. As well as just generally your interest in this. What is the interestedness of this problem and why are the best talent going to want to work with you? And why should I as an investor believe in you? I think that those are like the questions that we're trying to answer generally at like the pre-seed and seed stage.
And how about for those who want to come in and be an investor? Like on that side of the table, what is some advice you have for early investors who are just getting their foot in the door or want to just, start working with these companies like you did prior to even investing on yourself? What are some ways that they can break into this industry?
Well, I think first it's like knowing if this is really the industry that you want to be in. I think that there's like the few things I'll note about VC are that the feedback loops are really long, and everyone says that, and it is very unclear what it means, but I think tactically what it means is that it's very hard to feel satisfied on the day-to-day because you never know if you're doing enough or if you're doing the right thing, because you just aren't rewarded really and until maybe 5 years, but technically really 10 is like the limit. And I think that there's something about that means that you need to be very proactive about creating your own motivation. I think if you work at a firm or something, you can get more of like the validation from appeasing your partners or something, but at least for me, that was never really what interested me about investing. It was more about the craft of understanding humans, making good decisions, building a brand, and serving people long-term in partnership. And so I think that like, honestly, what served me the most was becoming more honest with myself about what my strengths and weaknesses are, whether I am actually a fit for VC. And I think in my case, because I get a lot of satisfaction and have kind of like designed feedback loops for myself around writing and being around other brilliant people and learning from them, that works for me. But other people it might not work for. So I think that like there is some digging that needs to be done there. But beyond that, it's like what served me a lot is writing, building a brand, being very clear on the types of people that you want to back and having like case studies of how you help them, as well as just generally being of service, I think is like the key act of what being a VC is. And so starting to exercise that.
Was there anything after you had your experience as a non-founder of a VC fund and firm that you wanted to come into this industry and change? Like, was there anything that you had experienced that you really wanted to shake up or put your own spin on it as kind of a leader in the space now?
Lack of track record is something that was the main deterrent for me from starting my first fund. And I was very lucky to have some early believers that believed in my taste, as they saw exemplified through my decisions, my rating, the companies I've worked at in the past. The way that I see it is VC is trending in a direction where we have the big factories, which are like the big firms, and then we have the hyper-specialized small firms, and there's solo GPs and small firms and super angels. And that is something that I think that the smaller firms and the solo GPs and these angels, I hope that increasingly LPs are more excited about them being stranger. Because I think that the stranger they are, the more they will deeply resonate with the right types of people and founders. And I think that specialized approach is a bet that is very anti the big firms, but it is ultimately where I believe the alpha will come from, because you need both. You need like the more indexed approach, and then you need the hyper specialized small bets in a lot of different, highly concentrated in a specific type of founder or company or whatever it is. And that doesn't necessarily need to be specialized to a sector. That can be specialized to a type of person, an archetype. And so I think that there's like this growing definition that I'm hopeful will be emerging, and trying to help write that definition myself, around just there are ways of stratifying founders that are not necessarily by sector, and betting on firms that are specialized in capturing all of that strata of type of founder is like, that can be a winning approach.
And my last question for you, we know that so little funding goes to female founders. Around 2% of venture capital funding goes to female founders a year. Being a woman in the space, being a young woman in the space, being in the under 30 category, how do you see your position in this industry, and how do you plan to kind of either bring more women in? Do you plan to bring more women and young people in, or where do you kind of see your age and your demographic as maybe a strength, maybe a weakness in this industry?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in some ways I am very, I remember, I definitely don't look like the model of VC. And so when I started to fundraise, I think there was a lot of, in some cases, like raised eyebrows about like, who are you and how did you get introduced to me? Like, how did you're young and you're a woman and like you don't have a track record. What is this? But I think in some ways that also kind of helped me, because I think the right LPs that understood they understand and are bought into the differentiation approach of like VC should be weird and they should stand out, and so they really resonate. They were like, oh, okay, there's something, like you'll probably get someone that the other people that are more middle of the road VCs, just very well connected in this space, would not know. And so being a like weird fish in a small pond has kind of helped me a little bit. But I think in general, yeah, I think that there is something about, like, even as exemplified for my Fund 1 portfolio, I do, compared to the average other fund, I will definitely be investing in many more women. And that's something that I think also there's unique ways in which that I can help them, because I just understand what it's like to be a woman that also needs to raise money. And so there's some kind of like resonance there that I am excited about continuing to expand upon.
Yeah, well, I love it. Stay weird in the VC space, I guess.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was super great to get to know more about you.
Thank you so much. Lovely.